Psychological torture, beatings, forced labour, starvation. These are the chilling allegations of one Australian man who survived nearly 5 years inside a Chinese prison, he claims, for a crime he never committed. Now, Matthew Radalj is breaking his silence. On the 3rd of January 2020, Aussie Matthew Radalj left his apartment in Beijing to pick up his phone from an electronics market, having dropped it off for repairs. It was a decision that cost him his freedom. Matthew claims the shop owner tried to extort him for more money. When he refused and tried to leave, he was beaten by security guards with batons and pepper spray, accused of stealing the phone. When the police arrived, Matthew says they did not believe his story. Instead, he was taken into custody.
Corruption is still very widespread in Chinese government authorities. A foreigner who's got some money behind them was an attractive target. It's absolutely credible that he was falsely accused and the people involved in his arrest were shaking him down.
Matthew claims he was forced into signing a false confession to robbery. The hope this would reduce his time in jail.
It's almost 100% conviction rate if you're actually arrested and charged in China. Because the Communist Party can't make a mistake, if you're arrested, you must be guilty.
Released in October last year, Matthew spent nearly 5 years inside Beijing No. 2 prison, a facility used for international detainees. But there were no media reports covering Matthew's ordeal until January, when Cheng Lei, who was also imprisoned in Beijing for 3 years, brought his case to light.
Australian man Matthew Radalj was running a successful streetwear business in Beijing when his life was forever changed.
Radalj was among 64 Aussies imprisoned in China last year.
There is no transparency to the Chinese criminal justice or prison system, and that's because it would expose that it is not independent, it is not credible, it is a creature of the government.
Now, Matthew is sharing his story, shining a light on the Chinese justice system he says is built on psychological torture, beatings, starvation and forced labour. Matthew Radalj joins us now. Matthew, what were conditions like in prison?
Pretty horrendous, in all honesty. It's obviously my first time being to prison, but most of the other inmates that were in the prison have been to prisons all around the world. And the one thing that was pretty constant was their opinion that just an unparalleled level of psychological torture that you receive in Chinese prison. And that takes its toll on people.
So what would an ordinary day on the inside look like?
We're woken up pretty early, say 5 a.m., and then you would have very limited amount of time to get ready to go to the factory. And that would take up 8 to 9 hours of your day. You would have to march to the factory like a regiment in the army. You'd have to sing communist songs, and then you would spend all day doing menial tasks for salaries that could not even sustain yourself for one day, let alone for 1 month. And then you would be returned back to your cell block at night and be fed and then deal with the overcrowding and try to sleep in some way.
Wow, and if that wasn't enough to break your spirit, you were also locked up in solitary confinement. What happened?
Yeah, towards the end of my first sentence, there was a scuffle in the prison yard and somebody came at me to punch me. And I punched someone in self-defense, and then I spent 194 days in solitary confinement with no legal representation, and I was given an extra sentence of 9 months and 3 days. That was really hard, to be honest, because I got my second sentence 3 weeks before I was supposed to be released, and I couldn't even contact my family and tell them.
How on earth did you keep going?
I realized early on, I was like, okay, I've got a 4-year sentence. I'm going to break it into semesters and try and make the most out of every single day that these people have taken away from me. I was acutely aware that giving up 4 years in your early 30s is pretty prime real estate. And I decided that I wasn't going to allow them to make that time a complete waste. If the guy next to you is from Colombia, you got to learn Spanish. If the guy next to you is from East Africa, you got to learn Swahili. If your Chinese is okay, make your Chinese excellent. You got to really be a self-motivated person. Otherwise, it's just so detrimental to your mental health, and it's just such a waste of time.
You kept a journal as well inside the prison, despite a ban on writing. How did you manage to do that, and how did it kind of help you?
When you're in a space where there's no privacy and you've got 3 cameras in the toilet and 2 cameras in the cell and you're on camera the entire time, the one thing you crave is privacy. And when you're in an overcrowded situation, 12 people in a room, when I was in the detention center, 30 people in one room, you kind of crave this safe space where you can go, like a den where you can retire with your thoughts. And luckily, I just started in exercise books, and some North Korean guys that they smuggle for a living. They told me that the inner ply of a coronavirus mask is very tensile, and you can write on it and screw it up into little balls. And they told me to write small, and that slowly I started to accumulate about 54 masks in total. And then when I decided I was going to take it out of the prison, I had about 60 or 70 people give me their contact details because they hadn't spoken to their families in a decade. Some of their families didn't know where they were. It ended up serving another purpose, and that was for me to go out and tell people that, hey, you know, your brother's not dead. He's in a Chinese prison, and he'd love to hear from you guys.
Matthew, your story is quite unbelievable. Can you take us back to how this all started? You've described what happened to you as a shakedown. Why do you think you were targeted?
Still to this day, I don't know. I've had 42,000 hours to think about it, but I just feel like the opportunity was there. There was a lot of anti-Australian sentiment in China during the Morrison government, and being Chinese and being able to speak the language, that works in your favor. And if you want something from a foreigner and then you're in a situation where you can take it, that you have that opportunity. I don't think it was anything more complicated than that, just opportunism. I think if I had just walked out and said to myself, okay, is an iPhone 11 really worth 5 years of your life? Of course not. I never imagined that I'd be set upon by security guards with pepper spray and tasers and basically fight for my life. 3 or 4 people were sitting on me, and I was screaming in Chinese, "Wobunang Hushi," like I cannot breathe. And they were basically telling me, no one cares if you can breathe or not. You're a foreigner and you robbed somebody. I was happy to see the police. I thought, okay, now the police have come, I'll be able to explain my side of the story, and it's just not what happened.
Well, so often when Australians end up in situations like this, the Department of Foreign Affairs will get involved in some way. Did you get any consular assistance?
I received communication with my embassy on 7th of January. I didn't hear from them again until 30 minutes before I received my verdict on the 25th of November. And then once I was transferred to prison, the only thing that consistently came out of DFAT was outdated information, incorrect information. And it got to the point where after I was released, I wrote an email to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade outlining how I think we could do better as a department, as a country, how we could not fail the next Australian that comes up and is incarcerated in China. And also I filed a host of grievances that I have with the consular services team in Beijing, which led me to having to apply for a Freedom of Information Act because I don't believe that the DFAT investigated my claims. And I received an email from Jen Adams, who is the director of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And she just told me that after reviewing the case, that she felt that I'd been treated according to the consular charter, which is deeply, deeply disappointing.
Hey, Matt, you had a girlfriend when you were thrown in jail, and she waited for you. She waited 5 years.
Yeah, she's a pretty amazing woman, to be honest. Yeah, and a lot of writing letters and trying to get them to her, and her writing letters in September and me reading them in April. But eventually we put it together, and we were engaged on the 18th of November, so just a month and a half after I was released, and then we got married in front of our family here on January 10th. So it's been great, and we've had an incredible 90 days. The things that we've done in the last 90 days, most people take 3 to 5 years to achieve, so we're very happy with that.
It's an incredible story. Those are remarkable and quite touching pictures as well, Matthew. Thank you very much for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate giving me the chance to tell my story.
Now, we should point out we did approach the Chinese embassy. They did not, however, get back to us. We also heard back from DFAT, who said that they provided consular assistance to an Australian detained in China, but owing to their privacy obligations, they're unable to provide further comment.